morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into Two-Man Game here on ClavesOnline.com. Rammer, how you doing today, sir?
It's a beautiful day, and it's March Madness, and everything is wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Everything is wonderful. So we're going to talk a little Billikens basketball today. Obviously, their season ended with a semifinal loss to VCU in the A10 tournament. So they're not going dancing, also not selected into the NIT. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Billikens and also give some of our more positive, fun first thoughts as the NCAA tournament technically underway with the first four. Two of the first four yesterday, the other two first four tonight, and then obviously Thursday. So we'll help you get your first round bets in and maybe some last bracket picks in later on in the show. But I do think we need to dive in, obviously, to that loss against VCU and kind of a little season review of the St. Louis Billiken. So let's dive into the most timely thing, which is, of course, a bad loss. Obviously, it turns quickly. They come out the gate. They get an early lead against VCU 5-0. They could have extended it, but immediately things start going wrong. It turns in VCU's favor. St. Louis cuts it close, from about a 15-point deficit to a 6-point deficit, two possession deficit going into the half, and then coming right out of the half, everything completely falls apart and derails, and you have a little bit kind of a cosmetic comeback late in the second. Your thoughts, kind of not overall in the game. I really kind of want to get your thoughts on that, in-game, 10-minute span, the last 5 minutes of the first and the first 5 minutes of the second. Kind of your thoughts on SLU getting back in the game and then immediately letting it slip away to start the second.
Yeah, because it gave you some hope, turned out false hope that you just couldn't sustain it. VCU on both ends of the floor were, I think the word I would use for them is relentless, and the Billikens just couldn't hold up to that kind of intense play, which is frustrating. And so, as you point out, as an overview, VCU is just tougher, more athletic at every position and tougher.
And I think that kind of, brings us to the larger, question, the problem, which is that, how big of a problem is that? Is it a disappointment that at the end of this season, with all the expectations we had going in, and again, you talked about it, I think it was 2 or 3 podcasts ago, how much of the expectation question is our own fault. But when you look at, when that's your final conclusion against the best team in the A10, and it's clearly that there's a gap between the two, does that leave you disappointed at the end of 2022-2023 for the St. Louis Billikens?
Well, the season's a disappointment, but it's still it's a good season, but a disappointment. Both things can be true. You won 21 games. You had some nice victories over really good teams. You couldn't beat the best team in the league. You would like to have thought that you were going to be the best team in the league, but you weren't. I kind of liken it to you're counting on getting an A. You need an A, but you end up with a B or B minus. Still a good grade, but it's not what you expected. It's not what you think you should have gotten, and you just didn't either study enough or you weren't as prepared as you needed to be. But a B is good, but you expected an A. And I think that's what this season was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest reason why that's a problem is I think the biggest problem for the St. Louis Billikens this year was obvious. And if you went and watched them in games, it was clear. But for me, it was the very first statement I think I had when I was watching this team before they even went to Italy. And I was watching like the second practice, I think, and my comment was simply, they're not really a great defensive team right now. And that never changed. They had one of their worst defensive years, obviously, in the Travis Ford era. But going back and looking at it, it's one of the worst defensive years they've had in the last 20, 25 years of St. Louis basketball. If you look at some of the numbers, just points per game and those kind of things. So they were a bad defensive team, and that's why the George Mason game and having such a great defensive game and a game plan that was so perfectly executed and really covered for some of your faults and accentuated some of your strengths. That's why that was such a big deal and why making those adjustments in that game was such a big thing to me, because I think that's the biggest disappointment if you're looking at St. Louis is it doesn't feel like there was enough adjustments. Now, to be fair, of course, to St. Louis, between them, again, not being a great defensive team at the start of the year and them not being a good defensive team at the end of the year, you also lose Fred Thatch, and so you're never able to have, or you don't have your best defensive player, especially on the perimeter where you had most of your problems, the entire second half of the season. And so you have to take that into account. But I do think if you look at the numbers for Travis Ford, his teams have been trending up offensively and down defensively over the last 3 seasons. And we saw this year kind of both the highs and lows on both ends.
Which is not unexpected when you look at personnel.
No, not
if you look at personnel, you go, oh, yeah, that kind of figures. When you lose 2 of the best defenders the program has ever had in Goodwin and French, I'm not excusing it because it wasn't addressed personnel-wise, but it's understandable. Big difference.
Yes, and I'll get and so put a pin in that thought really quickly because I also want to get into the other big thing, which is St. Louis's inability to capitalize and then hold on to leads, and seemingly not be able to come out of halftime with that mentality to win games. And again, that's a little bit more ethereal, not 100%. Especially that second part, a little bit more. You can't grasp it. It's a little bit more of a question. But nonetheless, I think that's what most people saw from the Billikens this year, especially in some of those big games they weren't able to win. Looking forward, is there an issue with you that that's one of the big problems this year? Is that a bigger systematic issue potentially when you have a season where a team cannot finish games and isn't making, it seems to be, the adjustments in halftime that you want to see consistently? Now, again, we over-accentuate the games where it doesn't happen and almost never talk about the games where it does. And maybe that's a case of kind of prisoner of the moment here.
I don't think that's a question you can answer yes or no. I think were there games you didn't close it out? Yes. Were there games that you sort of got waylaid coming out of the locker room at halftime? Yes. So I think the best way to do that is to go through and say, okay, in this game, why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're done, see if there are trends and some commonality between some of these incidents. So I don't know if I have a good answer other than I think to really find an answer, peel it away a little more and look a little deeper to figure out, yes, those things happen. That's obvious. Why did it happen?
Everything I can remember from those games, almost the common denominator in all of them was sloppy possessions and turnovers. That's what almost every single one of those games, including VCU. It's a great example. It was sloppy possessions, and most of the time they would lead to easy turnovers. That's the biggest problem. And so that kind of, and so when you see that as the issue, I don't know if that's something that you can put on, a halftime adjustment or coaching or coaching mentality kind of thing. That's my read on why they had those issues. Because I think, mainly because I can't. It would be ridiculous of me to try to say, well, the mentality in the locker room at halftime is off, because I have no idea.
Yeah, and then how would that, if that was the thesis statement, how do you prove it? Not because, well, look, they turned it over. So in the locker room, we said, we don't care about hanging on to the basketball this half. Well, that's silly. And I would tell you a lot of times under intense pressure, the team tried a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think to their detriment, different ball handlers, getting Yuri off the ball and pulling that double team with him and doing some of those things. So I would contend that often adjustments were attempted in those situations with a modicum of success.
That's fair. Yeah. I would agree with that. And so I'm gonna, and this is kind of the big question that people have been bouncing around. And me and you kind of talked about this a little bit. Neither one of us really agrees with it, but I'm going to change the question because I think just asking, should SLU continue with Travis Ford? Should Travis Ford be fired? First of all, Chris May said it on Frank Cusimano's show on the Hollywood Casino Press Box on 590 The Fan that Travis Ford's going to be the coach of this program for a long time. Again, anytime an AD or an owner or a GM, what have you, says something, you got to take it with a little grain of salt, especially when you have a bad loss in between that conversation and the conversation we are now having. But nonetheless, I think it's pretty fair to say that one game wasn't going to shift him from he's going to be the coach of this team for a very long time to get him out of here right now. And so I'm going to ask a different question, which is Travis Ford the right coach to take the Billikens back to the NCAA tournament? That's essentially how I'm going to phrase it. And the reason why I'm going to bring this up is Chris May's biggest point when he brought it up was recruitment and Travis Ford's ability to build a program. And I know recruitment rankings aren't everything in the world, but the bottom line is when you look at the consensus across every site that ranks these things, Travis Ford has recruited 9 of the top 15 recruits in the last 30 years of St. Louis or 25 years of St. Louis basketball. And for a long time there in the 2000s, they were consistently ranking from anywhere from 130 to 215 in recruiting. Travis Ford gets here. They have 1 year in the 150s, and every year from there, it's been a top 100 recruiting class. So when you talk about what Chris May said in his answer, those are the facts behind it. And when you look at and again, I know 20-win seasons aren't what people want to hang their hat on anymore. But if you look at the fact that 2020, the season got 2019-2020, the season got kicked short because of COVID, when they were 14-7, that 667 winning percentage is the second best in Travis Ford. So they're probably a 20-win team then. That would mean that 5 straight years Travis Ford had won 20 games for the Billikens. Again, things could have gone terribly wrong in the spring of 2020, but we were watching those games. I doubt it goes that badly. And so essentially we're talking about 5 straight 20-win seasons, a couple 23-win seasons in there, out of 7 years, 5 out of 7. That's monumental compared to every other coach before him I went back to Rich Grauer. You know, Grauer was 3 for 10 when it comes 21 seasons out of total. He was 3 for 10. Spoonhour was 3 for 7. Romar 0 for 3. Soderberg 1 for 5. Majerus 2 for 5. And Cruz goes 2 for 4. Obviously, we know the situation he was dealing with who was building the team. And so I don't want to get bogged down in this is the St. Louis past, so stop asking for more. Because, and you said this earlier when you were on Frank Cusimano's show, you have to just look 120 miles down 70 to look at the ability of the right coach to turn things around. And so, with the facts ahead of us as to why he will stay the coach, and if you look at Kansas State, it's another great example of a team really getting turned around in 1 year by a young, effervescent coach. If you take those things, the facts we have, and the examples we have very close to us, and then I think the question, and then that's kind of my basis right off the bat of the question: is Travis Ford the right person to take the Billikens back to the tournament?
Well, I can only answer it with another question, which is, I know, annoying. So I'm guilty. For people who are annoyed, guilty. I'd want to hear more specific reasons why he's not, and I think that's an easier way to break it down. You mentioned Chris May talked about recruiting, and I'm trying to get you threw out. First of all, let's be clear. The rankings are opinions.
Yes.
So you use the word fact. I'm not trying to pick on you.
That's fair.
And I'm not, even though I nitpick for a living, I'm not trying to do it here. Those are some other guys' opinions.
Yeah.
They're probably right most of the time. I don't know. Here's the deal. Rarely do people go back over 2 or 3 or 4 years. Like 4 years ago, of the top 100 recruits, how many of them were top 100 players after 4 years? Maybe all of them. I don't know.
No,
was it 100? Was it 10? Was it 50? I don't know.
Because even in the other stat I mentioned, 9 of the top 15 St. Louis recruits have been in Travis Ford era. Cartier Gordon's one of those guys, who obviously didn't, produce on the court for St. Louis very much.
Where was Anthony Bonner ranked? Nobody recruited him. It was SLU and SIU Carbondale. He's the greatest Billiken of my era. So now that's an example. That's an anomaly. Yeah. I'm not saying disregard. I love it when they get highly regarded recruits. It's fantastic. But I just think we got to be careful as using that as facts. You brought up some coaches who did some quick turnarounds. That's why I think this would be a key year for Coach Ford and the staff. He's got a good group of sophomores coming back. He's got 3 incoming freshmen that I am very excited about. Point guard, power forward, center, and a center. Very excited about all 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, without question, the transfer portal will be how you measure this team 1 year from now.
Yeah, and it's funny you say
What
that
happened in the transfer portal, and how did it produce in the 23-24 season? I'm telling you right now, that'll be the beginning and end of the evaluation.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I had gotten to when I was thinking about this question. Is I know it sounds like a cop out to say, well, just one more year, but especially because of the expectations people had for this year. A lot of people said, well, this was the one more year, but it's when you look at those 2 turnarounds. I love that you mentioned that too, because look at Kansas State, look at Missouri. Just a crap ton of transfers. I mean, Dennis Gates just pretty much picked up all his graduate students from Cleveland State and said, let's go do it again somewhere else. And he had some solid, recruits, and Kobe Brown sitting there waiting for him in Columbia, and you saw what he was able to do. And so that's a really good point. And that's kind of where I hit as well. There's no doubt that there was disappointment this year. And there's no doubt, in my opinion, that the big issues in this on this team were from both a coaching system and player level. And we just talked about, not being prepared defensively for the coaching level, and we talked about the entire season.
Wait. Where did we talk about not being prepared defensively?
Sorry, I didn't mean prepared X's and O's. I meant personnel.
Personnel.
I meant recruiting. Yes, because I was just talking about how they've done a good job recruiting, and so you have to then say that, well, there's a hole in your recruitment when you can't get a defensive player. And you were going into the season essentially saying your best perimeter defenders are Fred Thatch and then maybe Kellen Thames if he can play as a freshman. So I didn't want to say schematically. I meant
TJ Hargrove, who did a nice job most.
Terrence Hargrove did great. He's going to be the starter next year.
And Yuri Collins became an all-conference defender.
Yes, he did. And just one of the best honestly, an all-conference defender and one of the best off-the-ball defenders I saw the entire season. He was incredible. Hounding guys off the ball and ball denial and things like that.
But it wasn't enough.
And so, but we also talked about issues where clearly the team wasn't executing the defensive scheme to their best ability either. And so that's why at the end of this season, heck, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I probably would have been in the more extreme system, in the more extreme side of camp, because I didn't like what I was seeing from the Billikens X's and O's. That changed this year for me. I thought we saw a much more sophisticated offense. And I think, again, you look at the numbers for St. Louis, and this has been Travis Ford dialing in an offensive scheme with guys like Yuri Collins at the head over the last 3 or 4 years. That's why you saw it was 4 years in 18-19. It was 69 points, 71, 73, 75. It was a slow build. But again, the defense didn't come alongside it, and that's why they were a solid, if not great team. And that's why they were a solid, not great team, I should say.
I didn't think we'd be good defensively. And my disappointment is I thought we were not as good as we should have been offensively. I think this team should have scored 10 more points a game.
Damn. That would have been I think the highest I saw was Spoonball got an 80-point team out there one of his years. I don't think I've ever seen a SLU Billikens team score over 81 points per game.
Here's the thing: I don't care about all those other teams.
I know. I'm saying that would have been a blast to watch. That would have been. I have the numbers historically.
Well, look at the games when the Bills scored in the '80s. They were really fun games.
Yeah.
And I don't play the blame game, but I think it's fair to talk about disappointment.
Yeah.
And I think if you start going through game logs, I started doing this, but then I realized, why torture myself? But you start going through game logs and you see remarkable inconsistency of players. I'm not going to call out names. It's not important to me. But if anybody really wants to grind out, well, where's the disappointment? What are you talking about? It's unbelievable inconsistency up and down. One of my favorite things to do in prep for games is see who's hot. look for scoring trends, rebounding trends, that sort of thing. And many nights it was hard to get a positive trend on players. Look at Gibson Jimerson, arguably one of the best probably inarguably one of the best 2 or 3 shooters the Bills have had in the last 37 years. But he could be taken out of a game. You could take Michael Jordan out of a game, but are you willing not to guard Scottie Pippen and Kukoc and everybody else? But so go look at the 3 VCU games. First game he scored, what was it, 24, 26, something like that. It was a loss, but he was lights out. Well, as obviously VCU said, Gibson Jimerson is not going to beat us.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They didn't let him, and they still won. So not being able to pick up for each other. This goes down, this has to go up. And it just didn't happen. The inconsistency was consistent.
Yeah, that's good. And just looking at here, looking again, not trying to call him out. I'm just saying, when Gibson Jimerson when he was quiet, that's when they lost. When he had a single digit game, they lost 7 of their 12 games.
And here's the other thing it broke my heart, because he's such a good guy and a good player. If he wants to, he'll make money playing basketball, probably for a long time. I'd never seen it in 4 years. He had an inexplicable shooting slump for nearly a month.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from? Because the guy works and works and works. Where did it come from? But the Bills lost several of those games that they would have won had he had a typical Jimerson game. I'm not blaming him. Nobody picked him up. That's what a team does. One guy's down, the team lifts up. Didn't happen.
Yeah, and so I'm with you on there. It's going to be interesting to see how they build this team out. Like you said, right now everything's up in the air on the seniors and the COVID years that they
Not
have.
Really.
Not really. I think we know what's going to. Yeah, I think we know what's going to happen. They're all going to be leaving. So it's going to be a very different St. Louis team. And now the question is, again, if Chris May, one of the things he's going to talk about, he talked about this when they hired Travis Ford 7 years ago. He talked about this 10 days ago. It comes down to his ability to recruit and build a team. He's got a lot of room to build a team now, and if that's going to be one of a feather in his cap, then it's going to have to be a much better, more well-rounded build team next year.
Here's what I think. The loss to Maryland, the loss to Iona, the losses to VCU. I think they've got to find a couple of NBA players in the transfer portal, and they got to be big guys. And can you get Tyler Burton lookalike? I mean, that's what you need.
Yeah.
A 6'7", 6'8", world-class athlete who can shoot, who is practically unguardable. And I think they'll be inexperienced in the middle, but have depth with a 7-footer, a 6'10", and a 6'10". But I think having a power forward who's really a load, a guy who is when you look at him, this will be a guy who you expect double-digit rebounds every night, who's unstoppable in the post, and or a stretch for like a Rob Lowe from 12 years ago, who's 6'11" and can play 6'11", but also can step out and shoot a 3. Some combination of those kinds of things. We say, well, yeah, everybody'd love to have that. Well, those who get it will be good. Those who don't get it won't be as good. To me, that's the challenge. I think the guards are going to be good. Oh, one other thing. They need an experienced point guard to go with the incoming point guard medley. So you're not asking a freshman to play 35 minutes a night. Let him learn with an experienced guy. Split those minutes up. When you're under intense pressure, you've got a veteran to go to. I think that'll be critical as well.
Absolutely. And, we're going to be talking, as those transfers roll in throughout the offseason, we'll be talking about some of those. Right out of the gate, though, I want to mention, it's not breaking news, but again, Nick Kramer has entered the transfer portal. I thought that was an interesting move. That kid's going to go to like a Valley team, and score like 15 points per game and hit like 63s like 4 straight years. He's gonna do great wherever he goes. He's gonna light it up. He's a good athlete, and I think it's gonna be fun to see.
Look at it this way. Let's just for conversation's sake, I still want to play where my parents can come see me. Lindenwood, SIUE, SIUC, SEMO, Missouri State. Can you see Nick playing at all those places? Yeah.
You can see him bombing. Like I said, I can see him making 63s across his next 4 years of eligibility.
I have to assume that he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll be talking about those Billikens moves as they come. Before we go, Rammer, I want to get a couple of your thoughts on the tournament because I like the way you threw this down on your show High Noon with Nate Lucas. You guys have a thing. You can't call it an upset or if the betting line is within 5.5 points. And I love that mainly because right out of the gate with the Mizzou matchup, it's a great example. All the 10s are higher rated in KenPom than their 7 matchups. And so then a couple of them are favored. The 10s are favored in the betting. So if Mizzou would to lose, it wouldn't be an upset because despite the 10-7, they're actually right now the underdog by 1.5 points.
I'm not a gambler, but we all know the Vegas guys are the smartest sports people on the planet.
Yep.
In fact, they should have a representative on the selection committee.
Yeah, I like that. That's
here's why we came up with this. We can't, as sports fans, bitch every year about the seedings being ridiculous and then turn around and use them to gauge the matchup.
Exactly.
That's dumb. Mm-hmm. So, well, what would be an upset? We threw out some numbers. If you're a 5.5 point underdog, okay, that's an upset. But for 4.5, so that's the number we went with. You may say 4.5, another guy may say 6.5. So we kind of split the difference at 5.5.
But I love that's where you put it because if you check the lines and just for reference sake, I use FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com sportsbook for their lines. That's just so that everyone knows where I'm getting it from. Because I think it's perfect because two of my favorite first round upsets, quote unquote, by seeding are VCU over St. Mary's and Kent State over Indiana. But both of those are 4.5. And so the fact that I saw those, double-checked the numbers, and went, that's a great matchup for that team. And I went straight to it, and I saw, well, that's plus 4.5. The fact that I was able to scope out those as potential upsets that easy tells me the 4.5 to 5.5 split is a very good number for that reason.
Well, thank you. And I think, we just got – and my radio partner, Nate Lucas, is a degenerate gambler, self-styled. And I kind of get the hang, and over the years, you kind of get the hang of things. And I've been pretty good over time, kind of predicting what a spread might be. And though I never bet. And so I think that seems fair. If you say, oh, that's 2 points too high. Okay. But the thing is, I think it's a much better gauge than the seeding numbers. That's the point.
Remember, I get a feel like you're like somebody who you're worried that like if you started winning, you wouldn't be able to, like you'd catch a bug and you'd be like, I can't, I gotta keep being right and keep getting money here. Or maybe or is it that telling Bob Ramsey he's correct by giving him money is a slippery slope?
Very slippery.
That's what it is. Okay.
It's Vaseline.
Okay, fair enough. I didn't want to throw out, by your standards then, the upsets I do think are actually good right now. You talked about with Frank too, which I think is hilarious because he has a personal issue with the Iona-UConn game because St. Louis connections, the Calcaterra family, obviously they got their son plays or his cousin, depending on who you're talking about, plays for UConn. But then you have Rick Pitino and Iona. Iona's fantastic. We saw them play. Every number tells me with the style that Pitino's built there that they're going to be a tough out for UConn. It's a plus 9.5 line right now for Iona. Again, I think that's a pretty good number. And I found these two exactly on your marker, and I'm happy because I already have them penciled in to my bracket for wins. A friend of mine asked me, why do I keep seeing Furman over Virginia on every single website? And I told him it's because it's going to happen. Also, I think that it's also because every website's using the math numbers, and the math numbers are goofy because Furman takes a crap ton of threes, and It plays at a fairly high pace, and Virginia does not do either of those things. And so the formula might be a little bit broken, but I still do think just because classic, you take a lot of threes, you make a lot of threes. That's one kind of like tick I give to lower seeded teams on how they can win games.
It's a good point.
And it's the exact same thing with my other one, which is going to be Charleston over San Diego State. Also a 5.5-point line. Thank you very much, Rammer. I got it in just under the line. That's another one. They bomb threes. More particular with Charleston is they have a super low turnover rate. Because when I'm picking upsets, I look at 3-point shooting, turnover rate, and free throws. And Charleston hits at least 2 of those. And so that's another one I like overall. Right out of the gate, Rammer, do you have any over that plus 5.5 line that you're looking at?
I haven't really looked at that, but when looking at your categories to make those picks, this is just a generalization, and maybe Charleston beats this one, but often if you're a big-time 3-point shooting team, you tend not to get to the line as much as teams that have more of a balance.
I just need a good percentage. I don't need the highest rate. I just need to know that you can hit them when it comes down to it.
Yeah, but night after night after night, if you're a box score nerd around the country, you'll see teams with the volume of free throws winning games. Mm-hmm. And so you still got to get to the line. If you hit a bunch of threes and don't get anything, you better hit all of them. And that could be a real problem. The other thing about teams that rely on it on a given night, and this is what we're talking about, a given upset, that team absolutely can beat anybody, but they're not likely to make a long run because somewhere along the line, they'll have a cold night.
Exactly. And here's my thing. We were just talking about those 10s over those 7s. One of them's a local one. I know for a fact that you are up late at night watching those West Coast games that not a lot of other people do. Mizzou pulled one of those West Coast teams. I looked at the profile. Utah State, they're a lot like Mizzou. They don't force the turnovers or turn it over like Mizzou does, but they put up points like Mizzou does. Your thoughts on that Utah State matchup for the Missouri Tigers, which again has them right now as the underdog by 1.5?
It's got an opportunity to be one of the great games of the tournament, of the entire tournament. That could be a 98-95 game.
Yeah, and I'll the heart palpitations will go right with it. It'll be fantastic.
The announcers will be breathless. That could be, if both teams are on, it could be one of the most fun games of the tourney.
And I'll throw a bone to the Mizzou fans, which obviously I am. I honestly think, because you get the bum, you get the 9 seed, or you get the 7, I should say, and all of a sudden you got to face a 2 in the second round, better than having to face a 1 as the 8 seed. But still, I honestly think Mizzou drew the second best they could have as their 2 seed. Texas would have been the best draw, because I'm kind of iffy on Texas because of what I saw from them early in the season, and they fired the coach. I'm iffy on Texas, bottom line. Arizona plays at a super high pace, and they move the ball like crazy, which means there's more opportunities than not for Mizzou to hit threes and force turnovers while Arizona's trying to move the ball maybe too much. Again, any team that's a first or a second seed is not going to turn the ball over a lot. They're going to be a very good team. They're going to have an NBA athlete or 2 on their roster. And so the ability to outpace them and out-frenetic them like Mizzou wants to is low. And so you need a team, in my opinion, that is naturally playing a higher-paced game alongside you because it creates more opportunities.
But you got to rebound. Look here. Go look at last night's.
They have a monstrous.
Corpus Christi and SEMO. Why did SEMO lose? Now there was the big disparity in free throws, but here's talk. This goes to your point about rate. Okay, Corpus Christi got a lot more free throws, but SEMO, all they had to do was hit a higher percentage. They hit a normal, considered good rate. They win the game. But why were they in that position? Because they couldn't get any defensive rebounds. And when they can't get rebounds, they can't run. They can't get the pace they wanted.
And here's the thing. This is why there's probably somebody screaming at the screen right now when they heard me say I like the Arizona matchup for Mizzou if they can get out of their first one, because Arizona starts Twin Towers at 6'11" in Tabellis and 7 foot in Ballo, and Mizzou has no size. And so here's my point, though. I think if you're Mizzou, you want a team that is playing that much bigger than you, more than a team who's already playing 4 out with an undersized center, because they can run with you. And again, I'm not saying Arizona plays small. They're not a plodding team despite that size. I'm pretty sure, Tabellis can hit threes, and they got a lot of good guards. Courtney Ramey's there. I love watching Courtney Ramey play. My point is that if you're going to play the style Mizzou has, you have to accentuate it, and you have to get as many possessions as possible, because what it means is it means more chances for you to hit a three. It means more chances for them to make a dumb mistake and turn it over. This is why Virginia is a volatile team come the tournament, because there is no volatility, because they play such a low amount of possessions. I think it holds against them. And while on the other hand, I think Mizzou can do better if they're playing more possessions. It plays into their style. So people are going to see the size, and they're going to be scared. They're going to be scared. But again, you're not beating anybody with size anyway. So put that out of your mind and run like hell for 40 minutes.
You got to play your game, but you've got to execute, no doubt.
My last thought, if you're building your bracket today, my personal opinion, Rammer, if Sasser's healthy, it's Houston's to win. Obviously, the fact that they get the home field advantage, should they make it to the title game, is a big factor. I mean, when you're a team like Houston, anytime the journeys are the harder part than the final game, maybe. And so if you have home field advantage, it certainly helps. But if Sasser's healthy, if they get him back maybe in the second round, I think it's Houston for me, because unlike Virginia, they're defensive dogs while not slowing down the game too much offensively. They slow down the pace, but they still move the ball and they still try to score. And so that's why I lean towards a defensive team like Houston, assuming they have the one guy who makes their offense a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, my pick, and we'll talk about it well before we get to the championship game, but my pick now, and I'm certain I'm going to need a wrestle back around, after these first 2 games to redo a bracket. But I'm boring. I got Purdue KU. The more I just watch them, and I'm just really impressed by both those teams. And I think it'll be I think they have to beat themselves to lose.
Yeah, when KU lost, when KU lost, they had multiple players go in the first round. I was like, okay, cool, they're not going to be as good. And then Wilson decided that he was going to be an absolute freaking monster the entire year. Grady Dick decided he was going to come out of nowhere and jump up draft boards like no one's ever seen. Like that shocked the hell out of me. So Kansas being as good as they are, they're absolutely going to be a danger. I like that you put Purdue in. Zach Edey's a monster. And I would love if Purdue won, because I love Matt Painter. Yeah. I'll never forget the moment where everyone in Columbia was watching Jets, on Twitter accounts and stuff like that, because they thought Matt Painter was coming to Columbia, Missouri. And now watching him potentially win a title. I know I have Dennis Gates, but still, it's going to hurt a little bit. But I'm rooting for him anyhow. So I think Purdue's going to be an interesting storyline throughout this tournament. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. That is the 2-man game. We're going to be back later this week or I should say early next week, with more tournament talk here on Claves Online. Rammer, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we let you go, tell everyone about our wonderful friends over at Royal Banks of Missouri. For over 60 years, Royal Banks is bringing you the service you've needed. Every branch, as they've grown over all these decades, feels like your hometown branch. St. Louis proper, East Side, St. Charles, Northeast Missouri, each and every one has the motto, it's Royal Banks, where better service means better banking. Rammer, we'll talk to you later. Thank you so much for joining the show today. Thanks, buddy. And we'll talk to you later, St. Louis. You have a great rest of your day. This has been the 2-man game on ClavesOnline.com.
As one of St. Louis's fastest growing companies and largest private companies, St. Louis Acura is proud to serve you and remains committed to becoming better than ever for you. As new Acuras become more available every day, we are not backing down from selling 100% more quality pre-owned vehicles than ever before. We want customers that appreciate our friendly, outgoing team and our award-winning service, because at St. Louis Acura, we are better than ever for you.